So we have heard a lot about fraud and how devastating it can be, how large the losses are, and what a negative impact that has, not only on our industry, but also on consumers, which means me, you, your family, etc. So this is one of the reasons why I'm more than happy to be an advocate of good news and welcome three musketeers here on stage to chase away all of these gray clouds that have we created over the past hours here, and talk a bit about what are the practical solutions that are available today to successfully fight fraud. So I would like you all to give an applause when me welcoming the three innovators and builders of mobile network solutions to combat fraud. Here they are. It's Glyn, it's Adri, and it's Håkon. I think we can manage to arrange according to the pictures. Perfect. Have a seat. Thanks for joining me today. As I said earlier today, it was mentioned that shopping is one of the #1 vectors where consumers are being attacked. And e-commerce is a big part of our everyday life. That means that potential targets and victims for fraudsters is everyone here in the room. It's you, it's me, but it's also our beloved ones. It's our friends, it's our parents, grandparents, and our children. So it can be very, very frightening to see all of these fraud scenarios. But this is not new. This has been here for a while. Our industry has dealt with these problems for a long time already, and there have been many successes to fight this, to give organizations tools, and not only promises for the future, but to actually hand them tools and services that allow them to protect us and our beloved ones today. And this is what we want to deep dive in during this panel and during this session, and I'm very happy to have you guys on stage to talk about this. But before we go there and talk about the practicality of what mobile networks and its signals can actually contribute, let's first try to address the elephant in the room. Why is there so much fraud? What's going on with today's customer journeys that are predominantly online? What are organizations missing? What are some of the gaps that cause that problem that we are solving later? Håkon, do you want to get us started?
Thank you, Marco, of course. I hope everyone can hear me well. If not, please raise your hand or whatsoever. What are organizations missing? I think a big problem we face when talking to customers is that they come towards us when a compelling event happens, when something went wrong. So it's also a bit of awareness that we as telco are a trustful source to provide these solutions, and not only in a way that we can deliver solutions that prevent fraud, but also in a way that could contribute towards a life cycle of a customer and even improve the customer experience as well. So I think it's also a bit of us as telcos need to work on our awareness being there as a reliable source with reliable solutions.
Yeah. Any one of you want to add something? Glyn, you want to go next?
I mean, I think when I started this journey 10 years ago, building our first identity API, for want of a better word, we had a SIM swap service, which is a key lifecycle event. If you think about the lifecycle event from a mobile operator perspective and map that out, you can see really clearly where those areas of risk might be for brands that are using our products. And SIM swap's a really important lifecycle event for operators because it lets people move SIM cards from one device to another, or eSIMs these days. If they lose their SIM or it breaks, they can replace it, and they can go through in most cases, a strong identity process to do that. Unfortunately, fraudsters have also learned to exploit that lifecycle event and using it for illegitimate purposes. So therefore, we created a SIM swap service that lets brands, through aggregators in most cases, understand, timestamp for that SIM swap event. So I think, you know, account takeover is obviously one of those really big challenges out there today, and you know, things like password resets, which, you know, many of us might just use as a default login if we can't remember our passwords. You know, these are great for us as consumers, but they also become then exploited by fraudsters as well. So I think, you know, we have to think about, as operators, where we have these lifecycle events that are relevant to us, how could they be relevant to brands, and how can we build APIs to make that available, I think, on a really wide perspective.
I'll try to be very specific. Try to find a journey which you all can relate to. I was signing up. I will actually have you all order from Deliveroo. It's logged in my laptop, but it's also logged in my phone. And I ordered from the laptop this time because I couldn't find my phone. It was somewhere in the sofa. And then I look at my phone. I open the Deliveroo app, and I don't see the order there. And then what I realized is that, of course, I have a different account in the laptop, because you can just sign up with Google, sign up with Facebook, sign up with any Apple, right? And then in the phone I had sign up with email address. So clearly I ordered from the laptop and then my phone. I'm the same user, but I have multiple accounts apparently with Deliveroo. So like it's a journey that we can all relate to, and that is very clearly a problem that happens all over. So I think things like that are very specific, and then we'll talk about how some of those challenges can be solved.
Yeah. I think you summed it up very nicely, the three of you, by stating that the largest gap that the organization are creating is to create user experience without thinking about existing best practices to keep security. And that is partially because of a lack of awareness about what has already been created and been successful, right? And I think this is one of the reasons why we're here today, to showcase many of these solutions. Well, unfortunately, due to time limitations, we have to restrict us to a few solutions, while we talk about some of very specific solutions to fill those gaps, right? So I think we have a slide that we can actually pop up that might help the audience to follow us on our conversation here by actually showing a life cycle. Maybe we can get that up on the screen in a bit. So let's walk through this life cycle that can be exploited at very many points. And just start at the beginning, whilst we go through this step by step with the acquisition and onboarding. Adri, you mentioned that before. What do you think can organization do different to build a start and a strong starting point to avoid fraud across the journey?
Sure. We all sign up for services on a regular basis. And if you think about the journey, whether you're opening a bank account, a social media account, when you're trying to buy something online, the journey starts with some very, very basic details. Name, last name, and the phone number. And the phone number has become this, I think, unique identity piece that wherever we sign up for new services, your phone number is with you everywhere. And you might think, well, you're biased. You work for a telco. Of course, you're going to say phone number is so important, right? But the reality is that the organizations that sorry, I got distracted there. So the organizations that actually implemented the phone number deep in their journey actually really, really get it. If you go back to my example that I just said, people can sign up with multiple, social media accounts and Apple, Google, Facebook, and so on. There is one thing joining all of those together. It's the phone number. Regardless whether you sign up with Google or Facebook or Apple, your phone number typically stays the same, especially on this side of the world. I know in Asia and so on, dual numbers are more of a thing for different reasons. But the phone number is this unique piece, and because it's there in every service, enterprises actually understand that there is a lot of intelligence behind that phone number that can unlock various intelligence. So as an example, AIT was mentioned here. Because of SMS, OTP being prevalent in authentication. With Number Verify, which is an API which we have launched a while ago, which we're hoping we're actually going to see a huge pickup in the next 2 years. There's no AIT. The reality is that you put your phone number in and you're authenticating that user instantly and immediately, and you're connected that user with wherever they sign up, whether it's a Facebook or Google or so on. Actually, if you all have Airbnb on your phone, just sign out, and you'll see that the primary sign-in function is phone number. You can actually sign into your Airbnb account with simply SMS OTP, right? No password. Just log out. Just a phone number, because they get it. Because people don't actually remember how they signed up with Airbnb. If you actually sign out, try it, put your phone number in, it'll be an SMS OTP. No password, nothing else. But, as you know, there is some weakness in SMS OTP. It can be phished, right? Where it's Number Verify, you just enter your phone number and that's it. There's no AIT, no codes to be smished. So I think that's a very key journey. Additionally, we have also, I mentioned name, last name, date of birth as well. We as operators have to actually do due diligence before we onboard customers. We already collect name, last name, date of birth, address. We already have it, that address. So if we can actually check and verify in real time when someone is signing up for a service, whether those details match, that can actually reduce the journey time and actually can make those organizations ask for less things to verify those accounts. And additionally, we can very easily identify, is this a new phone number? Typically what spammers do is they get this new SIM, they go into a store, especially in the UK, right? You can go to Tesco, buy a SIM on the store and open any account. What the organization doesn't know, is it a real user? Is it a fake user? So you just go and buy a SIM. So we have intelligence where basically we can identify, is this a number that has been connected to the network for a long time or not? So you can actually differentiate between a SIM that was just literally purposed to create a synthetic identity to create fraud, with a SIM that basically is a genuine user that has been connected to the network for a long time. And all of these combined, when immediately at the start of the journey, you can pick up a lot of that fraud. So, yeah.
I think also to support your story is that we see in the Netherlands a lot of underage drinking, underage gambling, services like Match, and where you can verify someone's age, is really supportive over there, and is also now, luckily, the gambling industry and drinking industry is seeing, hey, this is a good solution also to comply. Yeah.
But I think what we're actually talking about is probably, if we want the phone number, and that's a proxy for the SIM card, to be the root of trust, and we've been in the identity business. It is all about identity in the end. As operators, we've been in the identity business by accident for the last 20 or 30 years because of the phone number, because of the SIM card. And I think we're now going to have to up our capabilities and probably really enhance our capabilities so that actually we can consciously be in the identity space on things like doing KYB properly, doing KYC properly, and then probably even beyond KYC. I was actually logging into ASOS yesterday. I'm probably not the normal ASOS demographic profile, maybe a bit younger, but I was logging in yesterday and it was asking me, am I a bot? And so I have to go through a process to prove I'm not a bot, as you do with these mobile apps. But actually, the future is going to be, I think, and if you speak to people like Dave Birch, who's kind of one of the leading identity gurus in the world, that in the future I will send my agent, I will have an AI agent that I send to buy things for me, and I'll just say, go and get this pair of jeans and get it for the cheapest price possible or the quickest delivery possible. And that agent will go across a number of e-commerce sites and bring me back the best deal. Or if I want car insurance, I can send my AI agent off to do that. So that identity space is going to have to then cater for those bots that are going to be going to e-commerce brands to buy those products, which means identity is just becoming really, really important to everything we do in our day-to-day lives. And as operators, we want to play a key role in that. I think we've heard today some really encouraging and positive things actually about what operators are doing in the identity space, RBM, verified sender, that's for messaging today, but it's not just going to be for messaging. I mean, Ellie talked about it. I think Ellie's done well to get the most call-outs of anyone today, so that must mean he's a visionary, so well done, Ellie. But I think he's onto something, because actually you can reuse, once you have that capability for doing KYB really well and doing campaign registrations, you can reuse that for any product. We can use it for voice. We could even use it for data in a kind of number verify sense, if you want to verify that a brand is who they say they are. And I think, further down the line, because, we can't do everything at once, maybe we can help consumers verify themselves towards brands. So if I'm calling American Express call center, I don't want to spend 5 minutes answering knowledge-based questions, some of which I've forgotten the answers to, like my first pet or, what did I do on XYZ birthday? Because my phone number and my operator will be able to facilitate that process much more quickly with the identity capabilities that we're going to have quite soon now. I think that's super exciting.
Something that to add, by the way, shame on you not knowing the name of your first pet. I was going to say some of you are messaging aggregators. If you look at so the question is, what is the success rate first time from the point when someone said, send SMS to authenticating, to actually, pressing autofill? I think it's around 93%, the first time success rate of an SMS OTP. And one of the things that I missed talking about was it's not just about fraud. It's actually about conversion as well. And a lot of companies care about conversion. So you might ask, well, okay, so SMS 93%, not bad. How does that look like for other forms of authentication, and specifically number verify? It's around 95%. You might think, well, 2%. Actually, 2% is not small. If you're having 1 million customers signing up, it means 20,000 more people are actually, signing up for the first time. So it's actually quite significant. So there's two things depending on who you talk to. If you're talking to banking, they mostly care about security. But if you're talking to someone who is not banking's financial services related, they care a lot about conversion as well.
Yeah, specifically in the e-commerce space, absolutely. Every vertical has its own KPIs, how they measure success, and how they want to drive their business forward. So I think that was a very interesting kickoff. We have certainly learned that the organizations that do not do everything right can look around at businesses, like you've just mentioned, Airbnb, that do things right, that have understood that if you don't have a person coming to your store, so you can judge based on your own experience whether that seems to be a legitimate customer that fits into your usual profile or not, because you have an online customer journey, you have to tie that sign up to something different. You have to bind it to a phone number. You have to bind it to a device. You have to create a different mobile identity that has been secured and exposed before, and the mobile operators provide that. And the mobile operators, at least the three of you, but there are others as well, have provided services to give organizations easy access to that and to utilize that and to benefit from that during the first phases of onboarding customers, having signups, etc. Now, from there, I want to move on to the next step of the customer journey, right? So we have now established that there are ways to create 95% conversion of new signups to make sure that these are legitimate users, potentially also avoid that there are bots there, although more services to come in the future, dealing with the question whether somebody is really human or not. So if we go on, and there is a relationship already, and the relationship has already been founded on like stable grounds, you do transactions with a brand. You change account settings. You edit your profile. There are updates. You get children. You change your name. You get married. Whatever you move, whatever there is. So there are things that you do whilst you are in a relationship with a brand in an organization. And these transactions are also being exploited and attacked very frequently, right? And I'm quite sure you have something on the shelf for these situations as well, right? So Glyn, I see you nodding already. And I think you also have a personal story here.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Marco. So, I mean, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning about account takeovers. I was a victim of an account taker on my Virgin Media broadband probably 10, 12 years ago now. And it was my main email account, as it happened, which came free with my broadband, or so I thought. But, it had no 2FA on it at all. There was no concept of multi-factor authentication. So all the hackers needed was my login credentials, which they obviously bought on the dark web or obtained somehow. And then they could log into my Virgin Media email and then just basically do password resets on every single account that was linked to that email address. And they did do that very successfully. And then we had this war of attrition over about a week where I would ring Virgin Media and try and persuade them that I was who I said I was, setting up new passwords and all this. And then I get my accounts back. And then like 24 hours later, the fraudster had called up Virgin Media and then managed to convince them that they were me and got all my accounts taken away again. So we had this battle over about a week, and eventually I set this like uber long password of about 30 letters, which I had to obviously write down, which finally retained ownership back to me of all my accounts. But it was a really good lesson for me that the most simple mechanisms and these kind of password resets, these account takeovers, all these things that brands provide for their consumers to make their lives easier are actually exploited by fraudsters. And therefore, what can we do as operators around the SMS one-time passcodes, which I talked about, things like SIM swap checks, but also, Adri talked about number verify, so seamless authentication. How can we make sure that there aren't shared secrets that can be given to fraudsters or even socially engineered by fraudsters? Because that's really one of the big things I think we see right now is actually customers are just being called up and asked for those codes, and the customers willingly give them, despite being told that they should not do that. I think we can learn from that, and I think it was said at the beginning actually that education is actually not working, right? I mean, when we talk to some of our customers, some of the UK banks, for example, they do all the education, but they just find people you've got to read all these messages about don't send money to fraudsters. People will just do 5 clicks without even looking at that screen until they get to the payment page, and they'll just click pay. So I think education, yes, it's probably hygiene, but I think as operators, we've been trying to really build out risk signals linked to those lifecycle events in our network that we can map to lifecycle events like account takeover in the brands we work with and the aggregators we work with. So we can really be game-changing, I think, in an identity sense.
Yeah. I think you also had a very nice story. And because we're running out of time, unfortunately, if you can catch Håkon later on in a coffee break or in a lunch break, just ask him about the red bikini story. And he's going to tell you one of his own stories around this as well. Unfortunately, we don't have time on stage now for this. But in that context, you mentioned that already that there is also a lot of social engineering fraud that is happening, right? And we have heard about being related to financial transactions, etc. But that's not all. I think you have at home done a lot of research on the fraud where fraudsters impersonate help desks, right? So do you want to elaborate on that scenario and what you're doing about this there?
Yeah, so talking about also retention and being a good brand is that it was actually also a compelling event where our help desk fraud or our social engineering fraud within banks increased with 300%. And this time the banks came to us and said okay, we have the feeling that all these people who are victims of more than 10,000 euros each, they're on the phone. They're being social engineered, and they're on the phone while doing the transactions. So we did the research, and indeed found out that 95% of the people were indeed on the phone for longer, with an average more than 65 minutes or more than an hour. And also we see repetitive calls coming in for the same average call durations. It just gives a glimpse of how much we as telcos already know about what's going on. Well, then we are also convinced about the Scamsinio API, which is a huge success, I think, in UK already. However, in the Netherlands, it's still on the shelf due to local legislations issues, where we are now talking to our ministries and convince them, make them aware again, also this side of the ecosystem, to have telcos interfering in such journeys.
That's absolutely an important point. The mobile networks have so many signals and they have so much power that, of course, people come up and say, oh, this can also be risky and this can also be exploited as well, potentially. And this is nothing that we have spoken so far, but as far as I'm aware, mobile operators do a lot to make sure that those signals are not being abused and do not go into the hands of the wrong people, right? So you have onboarding processes, use case approvals in all of the different systems and processes in place to make sure that these things are only being used for the right purposes and right reasons, right? Like, do you want to comment on that quickly, on that part?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking specifically about social engineering, some of the data that Scam Signal provides are actually typically what's called traffic type data, which are actually hold a special position in many countries. We specifically make those APIs available in like Scam Signal for financial services to prevent them from fraud. So yes, it's not something that can be made available to non-fraud related to use cases. Obviously, the data is actually super powerful to prevent that type of fraud. You know, knowing if someone is on a call, the duration of the call, because there's a direct correlation between call length and the propensity of someone being socially engineered. Average time for someone to get scammed is around 25 minutes, and the longer it goes past the 25 minutes, the longer the chances are that you're being scammed. And 99% of the time that someone gets scammed, he's receiving a call. He's not making the call to the fraudster, he doesn't know the fraudster, he's receiving a call. So that data actually has shown in the UK to improve the detection of APP fraud by around 40%. So 40% in some banks. And it's not just banking, by the way. I'll tell you a very quick personal story. I know we're short of time, but I think it's interesting. I received a call from, I have a lot of calls with fraudsters. They call me for some reason. They haven't. I always thought like they have like this list where they, if they interact with someone who's wasting their time, they like tell others, but it doesn't work.
They know you're entertaining. They know that you entertain.
So I always entertain those calls because I'm trying to learn, right? I'm trying to learn. And this time it was someone pretending to be from Coinbase, but it was very, very different from all the other times. And it was different. Well, the first thing that was different from the other times is it seemed like a UK-based call center. Which doesn't typically happen. So I received the call, and then they said that they're calling from Coinbase, and they said, we think that there's been a suspicious activity in your account from someone in Singapore. Have you been to Singapore? I said, no, I haven't been to Singapore. Okay. So they said, we're trying to make sure that your account has not been compromised, and then just to be sure that you're speaking to Coinbase, you will receive an SMS confirming it's Coinbase. And I received an SMS showing Coinbase. But it was nothing rather than a SMS OTP reset. Anyone can do reset if they know your email in Coinbase. Anyone can send an SMS OTP. So I see Coinbase. I'm like, Coinbase. Now, of course, being an educated user, because of the industry I work in, I know what's going on. But for the typical user, they don't even read the context of the SMS. The SMS says you're being reset, you're resetting your password for Coinbase. It just say Coinbase. Oh, it must be Coinbase.
It also says never share it with anyone, which everyone does, right?
So okay, I said, okay, interesting. I said, I still don't believe you. I said, okay, I'll send you an email. An email came, again, appearing from Coinbase, because he did a reset password, he knew my email address, he knew my phone number, so I received an email appearing from Coinbase. So it was extremely believable, and it was very, very different from the other times. And basically, long story short, they asked me how much money I have in the account. I entertained them to tell them I have 100,000. So I got taken to the superior fraudster, I guess, the guy who knows how to scam well. It's like, oh, you need to speak to my colleague. So I went to speak to the superior guy. And then, funny enough, and this is unrelated, but funny enough, like after I wasted the superior fraudster's time for a while, and then I said, who falls for this crap? Really, that's the word I used. And then the junior fraudster called me back and says, he called me back and he said, you were pretending this whole time, weren't you? So it's like I had to explain. So apparently the senior fraudster was having a go at the junior fraudster. Why did you escalate? And then the junior fraudster calls me like, you were having a go all the time, weren't you? So anyway.
What Adri didn't know is that we were just testing him.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's definitely a funny story. I like those. So yeah, I think these are very good experiences where we see that there is a lot of gaps to fill for organizations to make sure that the trust between a brand and the customer is really protected over time. And it's not only about the business protecting themselves against bots and like attacks against the business, but also the business has a responsibility to ensure that the customer is in the relationship with a brand in a secure environment, because this is how you choose your next vendor, right? Like, I deal on a platform that I can trust, where I have not been scammed on. I deal with an insurance company that has not been tried to be impersonated. I deal with a bank, etc. Of course, this is sometimes difficult, because by now all of the major brands have probably been attacked. But going forward, this might be a differentiator, and there are a lot of tools available by mobile operators to help the brands. This is on the shelf. This is already there. We're running out of time.
But just on that point, I think, and to pick up Håkon's point earlier about regulation, I think it's very encouraging now. We have this initiative as the telco operators called Open Gateway, which is a GSMA initiative, which you may have heard of. And part of that is about standardizing APIs and solving the supply side. So as mobile operators, all these risk signals we talked about today, and which are exposed via APIs, and many more, are being made available with kind of 80–90% coverage. So I think the supply side, the technology side, that's all being solved with the Open Gateway initiative. It's also looking to address, I think, the point that Håkon mentioned, which is, there is a divergence and fragmentation of regulation, or even risk averseness by different legal personnel in our businesses, to say that you can't share this risk signal in this market, but you can. And I see that in Telefónica. We can do stuff in Brazil that we can't do in Spain, that we can do in the UK, that we can't do in Germany. And it's the same product, addressing the same use cases and the same fraudsters. It might even be the same fraudsters who are addressing all of my Telefónica customers, and they're just going to the market where the risk signal doesn't exist, because that's easiest. That can't be right. So I think that's got to be addressed, that regulation issue, and I think we will see GSMA addressing that with the operators to make a more level playing field on the regulation side, as we have on the technology side. And when we get that, we are going to be playing, I think, more and more in the identity space. I think that's very exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, because we're running out of time, I will quickly wrap it up before we have hopefully time for 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever questions. So what I'm hearing from you guys is that organizations should put their customers at heart. It's really important, right, to not only think about their own revenue, but also think about how do their customers feel and what are their experiences and how to make those safe. I think what I'm also hearing is that whatever organizations do, it doesn't matter as long as they do something. They have to get started, right? And what I'm also hearing is a call out for, there are a lot of things that can be done. Don't worry, but go to your next M&O and start a conversation. There can be many proof of concepts to kick off new services and solutions, to then also build cases for governments and regulators to see that these things work, to then open up the door to put these up at scale. Right? These are the things that I'm hearing here in the panel, and I think we can all look forward to a better future thanks to that. So thank you. We can open the floor for questions now.
Thank you very much. We don't have time for questions because we have a virtual speaker waiting for us, but please give a round of applause to the panel, and feel free to pick their brains and hear more personal stories during the lunch break.
Thank you.